Have you ever seen a train shower? Look at this. Check it out, man. Women only. And the men. And we are here, man. Kolkata, as it's called nowadays.
This is Howrah Bridge.
Yes, I remember this bridge. Second time Calcutta. Yes. Flipping hell, we are supposed to wait, but not. Check it out, man. The Hooghly River with the locals gathering water and washing their clothes, and the Howrah Bridge behind that. The world famous Howrah Bridge is in front of us, and if I'm not mistaken, right straight ahead of this road is one very famous flower market. Check it out, we need to get up there. Good morning from Kolkata, former capital of the British Raj, and nowadays capital of West Bengal. Have you ever seen a video on YouTube that doesn't start at this point? I haven't. So here we are, honoring the tradition under the Howrah Bridge, starting our YouTube video. Bloody hell, what a noise, man. Kolkata was indeed the capital of the British Raj. The British East India Company came here in the 16th century and established commercial routes through Kolkata, through the Hooghly River, on the eastern part of which came ships carrying opium, among others. So picture this in your head, all these ships with goods plus opium flowing down this enormous river, man. I mean, look at it. Flipping huge. In case you were wondering, the bridge itself was built in 1943, and although it's generally known as Howrah Bridge because of the twin city of Kolkata that's on the other side, the real name of the bridge is Rabindra Setu, naming which was basically an homage to Tagore, to Rabindranath Tagore, the poet, the first Asian poet actually, who managed to win a Nobel Prize. Flipping hell, man, we have CCTV, can you believe that? In all this chaos. CCTV, man. The world's first Hindu cat. My friend Kostas wants to take a selfie with a very famous Bengali entrepreneur here. The spitting rituals are alive and kicking, even in Kolkata. Kostas knows everything about this guy. However, I don't see any movement on this street. Probably he's at home sleeping. We bloody found him. He's very much closed. Anyway, if I understand correctly, the guy was a pure hype. And basically TikTok hype, which is even more dubious, because TikTok is not allowed in India. According to the comments on Google Maps, the quality of food was not very healthy. My friend Kostas is more of an internet sensation kind of guy. Myself, on the other hand, is more of an intellectual. So he's leading me to TikTok sensations. I'm leading him to books and knowledge. Financial accounting. We definitely need that. This is probably India's biggest second-hand book bazaar. You can literally find everything here. Hello. What a place, man. I brought you to the book bazaar. You brought me to internet sensations, to TikTok sensations, and they are closed. Is this the best place in Kolkata or what? Probably is, isn't it? Check it out, medical books, nursing, engineering, dictionaries, literature. And what's even more wonderful is the popularity of the thing. I mean, look at all these people. Kolkata is, after all, the capital of culture of India. And it sustains this fame. This street, by the way, is called College Street. Various universities have their branches in the area. I mean, look at this, man. I mean, it continues. There are books everywhere. And we are here. It's absolutely gorgeous. And there's our table. The tradition of coffee houses in India is basically not a tradition. It, under the British rule, they made for the first time this association of coffee houses, and it was quite common all over India. After the partition of the country, most of them have remained in the cities of Pakistan. India, however, has kept a couple. For example, this one here is probably the most famous one, and there are others. Kerala, there is one, if I'm not mistaken. And in this particular one, it's basically well known for all the meetings of writers, of poets, of artists, of political figures. A lot of discussions and movements have been started here in this cafe. Hubs like this are extremely important for India, especially considering all the problems with a huge part of the population being illiterate. One can argue, of course, that literacy is directly dependent with financial autonomy, you know. The better you are financially, the more the chances that you get schooled and educated. Despite the fact that the caste system is officially abolished, unofficially, yeah, it's kind of not. Imagine, for example, a kid of the Untouchables. Imagine this kid going to the same school, public school, as the kids of the Brahmins or the upper classes. I'm not entirely sure if this works in the real world. Check out the beauty of this building, man. I mean, it's obviously an abandoned one, but still, there's a tree growing inside the building. In and out, that is. What a place. You don't really get to see butcher shops in India. You will definitely not see many Hindus eating meat, man. Muslims, on the other hand, do. And despite the partition of India, despite the existence of Bangladesh now, where most of the Bengali Muslims live, there are a lot which actually stayed here in West Bengal. Good morning, everybody. It's been 6 days since the last time I shot anything in Kolkata. Yes, we're still in Kolkata. You see, yours truly had the inspired idea to go to a small village which is some 2 hours and a half by train from Kolkata, called Shantiniketan. Shantiniketan is the birthplace of Rabindranath Tagore. However, that was when we got the Shantiniketan belly. Bloody hell, I spent 4 days in the bed. Besides the fact that I have some sort of flu, imagine vomiting and having the shitties all day. It was a disaster. So instead of spending 2 days vlogging in Shantiniketan, I spent 6 days being sick. Anyway, now I'm back to Kolkata. Right now we're outside Vicky's memorial. Queen Victoria's memorial is, I think, the biggest memorial dedicated to a monarch in the world, man. Can you believe that? Here in India, Queen Victoria. She does play a role in the history of India. We will discuss about it. Check out all this space. Kolkata has a very different vibe than the other places that we've been in India. Check him out, man. We found a guy who is basically moving his goats on the central arteries of Kolkata. Look at them. Wherever you look, man, in this place, you see traces of the past. And this past is a little bit different than the past, for example, in Varanasi. This past is basically British. In other words, Kolkata is probably the best place to talk colonialism in India. Erected to the honor of James Prinsep by his fellow citizen. One citizen, that is. Mr. Prinsep was a linguist, and he managed to decipher, believe it or not, ancient... check out this elephant, man. And he managed to decipher ancient Indian scripts from, was it the 3rd century before Christ? India has a huge history, many different phases, many different empires. We can't cover all of this in today's episode. What we will try to summarize in some ways is the era after the 1500s. You see, back then, two very different things were happening more or less at the same time. Let's start with the Mughals. The Mughals were basically Muslims. As a matter of fact, the guy who started the whole Mughal empire thing, Babur, was a descendant of Genghis Khan. Can you believe that? He was not so bright though. His grandson Akbar was a lot more intelligent, let's say. See, Akbar was intelligent enough to include Indians in the whole administration of the empire. It was basically the first time during the years of the Mughals that both Hindu and Muslim scholars felt comfortable. Bloody Google Maps sent me through a military base. Can you believe that? And not just any military base, Fort William, which is right over there. Anyway, back to Akbar. What Akbar also did was abolishing jizya, man. You know, the tax for the non-Muslims. That was important. Also, architecture was at its highest peak, man. You know Taj Mahal? That's when it happened. Akbar and his descendants managed to expand the Mughal Empire, man, to the point that they went bankrupt. Whoa, scuba diving, man. Would you scuba dive the Hooghly River? I wouldn't. What's interesting, however, is what was happening at the same time with the Europeans, and mainly the Portuguese. You see, the Portuguese were very anxious to find a new way to transport mainly spices from Asia back to Europe. till that point, till the end of the 1400s, Venice had some sort of monopoly, let's say, to the spice trade. The Venetians, however, were using the Silk Road to import goods from Asia and then selling them at ridiculous prices in Europe. So the Portuguese thought, we can do that better. So there goes our boy Vasco da Gama, that is. Vasco da Gama reached Kerala, India in 1498. Look what I'm going through, man. I mean, until this point I was actually walking over there. So I decided to walk on the sidewalk. But the sidewalk has all sorts of dangers. I mean, look at this situation here. The local king in Kerala reached the conclusion, after having some talks with the Venetians, that Vasco da Gama was a pirate, which is close to the truth, but still, different kind of pirate. His mission, therefore, was a failure, but not a complete failure. You see, upon returning to Portugal, he informed the Portuguese king that there is a seaway to India, and that was the beginning of the Portuguese colonization of India. For almost a century, Portugal was the major power in Europe, man, because of the spice trade. You need to understand the importance of spices. I mean, for us, it's now more or less about taste. But back then, it was conservation, man. I mean, spices were used to conserve food. There were no refrigerators back then. So Portugal became a super major power in Europe, to the point that other sea countries that were looking to expand their horizons, like for example the Netherlands, they even sent spies to Lisbon in order to, whoa, very noisy, to find out the proper sea map in order to reach Asia. Now, the Portuguese never actually colonized India the way the British did. You see, the Mughals always kept them under control. The success of the Portuguese, however, forced the French, the British, and of course the Dutch to form their East India companies. In other words, private companies, private corporation style companies, who would evolve into basically private armies.
24 hours later.
I can't find the words to describe the situation, man. You should see me running for my life, trying to find a toilet. It's not an easy task to vlog when you are sick. And it's not only the flu. I mean, flipping hell, my stomach. You can't imagine how many times yesterday I had to stop what I was doing and run for a toilet. Like, anyway, today is my last day in Kolkata. So yeah, it's today. I'll try to fill the gaps. Now we are approaching the Kali temple. Kali being, of course, a major Hindu goddess associated with the concepts of time, of liberation, but also death and destruction. What I do want to rant about, however, is Steven Spielberg. Do you remember the Temple of Doom? I mean, in how many levels has this guy completely influenced the souls of us that were kids back then into believing that the followers of Kali eat eyeballs in their soups, or alive snakes, or flipping hell, man. Spielberg destroyed the reputation of sharks and the reputation of Kali. What a prick. In front of me there is the building of the Missionaries of Charity, which is inspired and follows actually the work of Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa being probably the most well-known Albanian Catholic nun. Check out Messi, man. Besides being in a stadium, I generally have difficulty with huge crowds, you know, but when I'm sick and among the huge crowds, let me tell you, it's close to unbearable. Anyway, let's find a tuk-tuk or something. I also decided to take a lot of tuk-tuks today, not doing the huge walk that I did yesterday.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Check out what the Brits have built, man. What a cathedral, no? What a church. So this is St. Paul, the first Anglican church in the whole of Asia. 1838 was it built, was it finished. And today, as you can see, they have some sort of Thanksgiving ceremony. Check it out, we have VIPs. Anyway, in continuation to yesterday's horrendous vlogging experience, it was Anno Domini 1608 when the Brits finally arrived in India, and it was in an area called Surat. So you know the drill. The East India Company arrives in Gujarat, captain goes offshore, he has to move to Agra to meet with the Mughal emperor and ask for a permit to start building factories. Now the Mughal emperor, who is already in business with the Portuguese, he has absolutely no intention to help the Brits. So he kindly asks them to... 3 years later, the Brits do manage to establish their first factory in an area called Andhra Pradesh. Having gained some self-confidence, the Brits returned to Gujarat to fight the Portuguese and actually beat them and send them crying to their mummies in Goa. Year after year, more East India Company factories pop up, and the company gains strength and confidence until we reach year 1682. That's when the British decided to start negotiations with a new governor of Bengal, a guy called Aurangzeb. Now that proved to be a little bit tricky, you know, because Aurangzeb thought that the Brits were obnoxious pricks. So he not so kindly said no to their aspirations for a permit to open new factories in Bengal. What follows is a little bit funny, because the British, now let's not blame all the British here. The East India Company, thinking very highly of themselves, declared war to the Mughals of Bengal. Now the problem here is that okay, the East India Company had an army, but the Mughals had something like 4 million soldiers. So as you can imagine, they lost, and they came begging back to Aurangzeb to ask for forgiveness and mercy. Now Aurangzeb did pardon them and handed back to them all the factories that he had seized after he beat their asses in the war. He didn't yet grant them any permit to start and establish any kind of factories in Bengal though. The year is now 1707, and Aurangzeb finally dies, finally for the Brits that is. Since that moment, the East India Company started sensing that the Mughal Empire starts to decline. And not only that, but at the same time, another soon-to-be huge empire rises. It's the Maratha Empire. The Marathas are Hindus. Mughals are Muslims, Marathas, Hindus. Finally, in 1717, the Brits do get the permit to establish their first factory in Bengal. What's interesting here is that there is this story of a person called Job Charnock, something like that. He was an officer for the East India Company, and he was instructed to acquire, on behalf of the company, 3 villages which were along the river Hooghly. One of them was called Kolkata, the other one was called Sutanuti, and the third one, to my shame, I don't remember it. You do realize that this Kolkata village does have some connection to the name of Kolkata, right? I'm not 100% sure about this story, to be honest. because I read online, that is, that it's contested. So, yeah, just throwing it out there.
And not only did the Brits gain permission to start building factories, they also got an extremely good deal in regards to taxes. They were paying close to nothing custom taxes and trade taxes.
And it wasn't only the Brits that realized that the Mughals are falling apart. The French, the Dutch, the Danish realized this and came to India in order to try and take advantage of the situation. Basically extortionate India's riches and take everything for themselves. The Brits fought the Dutch in Indonesia and the Dutch kicked their ass. On the other hand, the Brits, during the 1700s, they were fighting all over the world against the French. It was India, North America, it was Europe, and they managed to beat them every time. The Indian part of this conflict lasted 17 years, man, can you believe that? And the British also won that war, which basically meant that the French were kicked out of India with minor exceptions. I mean, like the Portuguese were limited basically in Goa after a while. The French were limited in an area in the south of India called Pondicherry. And somewhere at this point starts the divide and conquer policy of the East India Company man. And they weren't always successful. I mean, the first thing they did was basically build a fort. That was Fort William. We talked about it yesterday, in between my races to find toilets. Now the building in front of us, which looks like a cathedral, but it's not. It's the post office building, built by the Brits and preserved by the Indians. This place was actually part of the old Fort William. Check out the beauties of Kolkata, man. 70 years after the construction of Fort William was finished, Siraj-ud-Dawla, that was the last Mughal ruler of Bengal. Now this guy managed to overtake Fort William, and he imprisoned both British and Bengalese soldiers. He used a very small cell, man, to imprison them. So small was it, and so many the prisoners inside it, that a lot of them were dying of suffocation.
After Siraj al-Dawla managed to kill all these prisoners, the British were very quick to dethrone him. And not only that, but they installed in his place their very own puppet ruler. And you know what the problem with puppet rulers is? Once they gain power, they forget who their benefactor is. And it was about that point that the British said, okay, puppet rulers don't work, we need to take things into our hands. So they took things into their hands. Now Siraj did not accept this without a fight. He made a coalition with the French. And the French, together with Siraj, met the British in the Battle of Plassey. A battle that the British categorically won. Basically another one that they categorically won.
In 1764, all these repented puppet rulers made a coalition with them among themselves to fight the British. That was the Battle of Buxar, which the British also won. And we're not over yet, man. There was still the problem of the rising Maratha Empire. And in regards to the Maratha Empire, there was a little bit of luck required, because the Marathas were also fighting among themselves. For example, there were power struggles. At some point, some throne pretender killed the ruler of the Marathas. And all of this led to various alliances between the British, between the fractions of the Marathas. It was weird. It also led to a huge war, man. I mean, and a lot of people lost their lives from both parts. After the first Anglo-Marathan War, there was finally a moment of peace, a 20-year moment of peace. Things were seemingly fine. However, the Marathans, who, in order to be able to fight the Brits, they made various coalitions with other kingdoms that
among themselves were not doing very well, you know, but they had to make an alliance to fight the British. During that peacetime, they started fighting each other. And that was the golden opportunity for the Brits to release the Kraken. By doing various deals and forming coalitions and sub-coalitions and friendships, and in some instances plain brutal war, they managed to reach the 1800s and being in control of 2/3 of the Indian subcontinent. Can you believe that? A company owning 2/3 of India, of a country like India. I mean, imagine a company like Facebook or X actually owning 2/3 of a country as big as a continent. Oh wait, this actually does happen. Yesterday I rambled a little bit about the Bengali soldiers in the East India Company army. Imagine you are in an army of white people who never take you seriously. You have absolutely no chance to get promoted or anything like that, and you are basically treated like shit. What would you do? They did revolt, and all these minor revolts eventually led to a general thing. They basically sparked the need for independence, and this need gradually grew in the Indian population. In 1857 came the first war for the Indian independence, which the Indians basically lost, and it would not be the only one. But this actually led to the formation of the British Raj. I mean, after this incident, major incident, the Queen Victoria, decided enough is enough. At that point, Britain took over India from the East India Company.
The present occasion may tend to unite in bonds of yet closer affection ourselves and our subjects. Wow, wow, wow.
And just like that, India was part of the British Empire. It took 16 years after this event, after the formation of the British Raj, for the East India Company to finally dissolve. A company that was born in 1600 and was dissolved in 1874. Like, insane, man. Google levels of world dominance. The amount of noise, man. Wow. I mean, look at this. Now, in terms of commerce, there is an important thing to clarify here. Before the British, India had a huge network of textile commerce. Imagine the money from the textile commerce, all of it was coming back to India, to the people themselves who are actually doing the salesman. The spice, opium and tea trade of the East India Company produced a lot of money, man, none of which returned to India. You can argue here that, for example, how can you say that none of the money came back to India when all these buildings were built? The railway network in India was built by the Brits. And all of these arguments are correct. However, none of these were for the benefit of Indians. All of them were for the benefit of the British. All of them served a function to what the company was doing and later the English Raj. Very, very indirectly, one can say that India benefited. Gallons of blood were spilled by the Brits trying to oppress the various Indian revolts. It also doesn't even come close to the fact that the British used Indians as
cheap labor. I mean, the amount of Indian people, Indian workers, who were transported by the company to Africa, all over the world, to build roads, to build stuff in other colonies of the Brits. It's insane. When the movement for the Indian independence started gaining tempo, the British did probably one of the most horrible things. They started suppressing the Hindu majority in the country, and at the same time they started giving advantages and the privileges to the Muslim minority of the country. And this led to a situation close to a civil war, man. I mean, once more they managed to create tension between the Indians, this time because of their religious preferences, and not against themselves, not against the British. To my understanding, the major event that played the most important role actually to the independence of India were the two world wars. If it wasn't for such a cataclysmic event in the world stage, I don't really think that India would have been independent, man. Can you believe that? And don't get me wrong, man, Gandhi was brilliant, and all the efforts by the Indians too. However, what really brought Britain to their knees was the war. It nearly bankrupted the empire. Some 3.5 million Indian soldiers participated with the British Army in the two world wars, especially in the second. And a lot of Indian blood was spilled back then. And imagine being an Indian and finding out that Britain is fighting the Nazis for the sake of democracy, man. I mean, and here we are in 1943. The Second World War still raves on. The Japanese have taken over Burma, that is current-day Myanmar. So the Brits decided to apply a policy of scorched earth in Bengal. In other words, they banned all imports of rice from Burma to India.
But at the same time, Winston Churchill ordered for thousands fields of crops in Bengal to be burned.
Millions of Bengalese people died during that year. Just like that. We finally reached the Second World War's end. And a bankrupt British Empire finally decides to agree to the Indian independence. 5 months later, man. 5 months. Can you believe that? The British Viceroy is here and is organizing the final details for the partition of the whole place. Partition which meant back then that there would be two countries instead of one. Later these two countries became three, India and Pakistan. Now there was an East Pakistan and a Western Pakistan. The East one later became what we know, Bangladesh. Anyway, Kolkata has more than 1,000 heritage buildings. Check out the Corinthian style, man. I mean, flipping brilliant, isn't it? At certain points in history, the frustration and anger of the Indians was so great, man, that they wanted to destroy a lot of them. And it took the intervention of the Indian state to basically save them. Some of them are restored, some others are, I don't know, man, trees grow in them.